Hey everyone, how's it going? This is Azren, the language nerd here, owner of the Calgary Language Nerds, and welcome to this YouTube video and, of course, podcast episode. You'll notice, for those watching the video, that I'm wearing this winter jacket. We've been hit with a cold snap here in Calgary where I live, and yesterday, the day before, and basically until I think it's tomorrow or perhaps the day after tomorrow, we've been hit with another cold snap. We have cold winters in Calgary, but generally speaking, in comparison to other parts of Canada, our winters are not that bad. The only thing about our winters is that we do get hit with these cold snaps every year, maybe one or two cold snaps, where we get like a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, something like that, where the temperatures are extremely cold. So, for example, today, I believe it's minus 30, and then we have wind chill on top of that. If you don't know what wind chill is, basically it means this is the temperature, regular temperature. Then you have a colder temperature, which includes the wind. So it's minus 30, but minus 40 with the wind, or minus 22 normally, but because of the wind, it feels like minus 34. So it's really cold, and I record these videos and podcasts often in my basement. So I've got slippers on, I've got this jacket, and I'm like, I'm feeling okay now, but if I didn't have all these layers on in the basement, I would be feeling very cold. So today I'd like to talk about two different things. The first one is something I talked about in my previous YouTube video. So I'd like to summarize that and revisit what I said because I think it'll help a bunch of you. And then I would like to talk about what to do when you're trying to learn a language and there's something you can't understand no matter how much effort you put into it. Maybe you can't pronounce a letter very well, no matter how much you practice. Maybe you can't understand a grammar point, no matter how much you practice it or study it or whatever it is. So what do you do in that situation where there's something that you want to learn, but you can't figure it out? So those are the two things we'll talk about today. So the first topic is the same one as yesterday's YouTube video. I didn't mention it on the podcast, but I think it's really helpful. So let's revisit it again in case you didn't see the video. So often language learners get stuck in the sense that they want to progress, but they're unable to progress. No matter what they're doing, they feel like they're spinning their wheels. And as I said in yesterday's video, I think there's three reasons as to why this happens. Frequently, anyway. One reason is there's a misalignment between your level, the resources you're using, and so level, resources, and learning needs. Meaning maybe your level's intermediate, but the resource is for beginners. Or maybe you're a beginner, but the resource isn't really for beginners. Or maybe your level's beginner, the resource is for beginners, but the way that the resource is made, it doesn't address your learning needs. So you have to make sure that there's a good correlation between those three. If you don't have a good correlation, you're going to have a hard time really learning and you're going to feel stuck. So if that's the problem, you need to switch things up to make sure you've got a good correlation between level, resources, and learning needs. All those three have to be in good alignment. Now, sometimes people get stuck when they're learning as well. As I said in yesterday's video, sometimes people get stuck when learning a language as well because they're just not putting in enough time, meaning they want to progress at a certain speed, but they're not dedicating enough time to realistically progress at that speed. So you want to get fluent in a language within 8 months, but you're only spending 30 minutes a week on the language. It's probably not going to happen. So think about how much time you're spending and see if you can squeeze out more time. Because the expectation, the unconscious or conscious expectation you have in your mind of when you'd like to become fluent by, if it doesn't align with if the amount of time that you're dedicating per week doesn't make it realistic for you to achieve fluency by the number of months or years you'd like to achieve fluency in your mind, if there isn't a good correlation between those, you're also going to feel like, ugh, I'm progressing so slowly. And of course, the third reason I mentioned yesterday is more of an illusion than anything. You just feel like you're not progressing, even though you really are. This happens to intermediate and advanced learners more than anything, because at those phases, anything you learn, any one thing you learn, very likely doesn't give you exponential growth. But in the beginner phases, you can learn one thing and it does give you exponential growth. For example, if you figure out a grammar point, well, or a grammar tense, for example, all the verbs you know, you can now use those verbs in that tense. So by learning one tense, you can now say 150 more things. That's a form of exponential learning. Or even something as simple as you know 25 words as of right now, and 3 months later, you know 250 words or whatever it is. That's a huge amount of growth in a very short period of time. You don't really get that as often when you are an intermediate or advanced level. So you could very well be making progress, but you just don't feel like you are. So if that's the position you're in, by all means, you might not even realize it actually. In fact, you might not even realize which one of those 3 reasons is the reason as to why you're feeling like you're stagnating, you're stuck, you're spinning your wheels. So feel free to send me a message on Instagram, Facebook, any social media platform at Polyglot Azren. That's spelled POLYGLOT or ZREN. Send me a message. I'm more than happy to hop on a quick 15-20-minute Zoom call and talk to you about how you're learning languages and help you diagnose exactly what the problem is for you and get you on the right track. Now, the second topic for today, which I mentioned in the beginning of the podcast, is what do you do when you're trying to learn something, but you can't figure it out? You're trying to learn the past tense in a language, but you can't wrap your head around it. You're trying to figure out how direct and indirect objects works, but you can't wrap your head around it. You're trying to work out how cases work in German, but you can't wrap your head around it. You're trying to figure out X, Y, Z, whatever it is, a pronunciation point, grammar, whatever, but you can't wrap your head around it. So what do you do in this kind of situation? Well, there are a few things you can do. The first thing that you may want to consider is that if you've been trying to learn whatever in another language, grammar, pronunciation, whatever it is, if you're trying to learn something and it's been a long time, meaning many, many months of you trying to figure it out, and you still can't figure it out, it might mean that you just have to let it go. Let it go, revisit it later. It could just mean that your brain isn't ready to understand that point. You're not far, you don't have enough of a foundation built up in the language for your brain to be able to understand whatever you're not able to understand. It's like if you tried to learn, let's use another example like math. Imagine if you were learning math and you were trying to learn something very complicated. Maybe you're trying to do high school level math, but you don't even have a good grasp on elementary school level math. Well, the high school math, no matter what you try to do, is not going to make sense for you. Until you go back and build the foundations, your easier concepts, the elementary school math concepts, until you do that, you don't have the prerequisite knowledge to understand the high school level math. Well, for language, it's similar enough where sometimes there's certain grammar points, pronunciation points, whatever it is, right? There's something that you're just not able to do, even though you'd love to be able to do it. It could just mean that at where you are right now in your journey of language learning, your brain is just not at this point in a position to be able to master the thing that you're struggling with. And the only answer might just be, if you've been trying very hard and you're getting super frustrated, the answer might just be to switch gears and move on to something else and revisit it another time. I've done this countless times with language learning myself, often with grammar, sometimes pronunciation. I just decide, like, you know what? I think this is beyond me right now, and I'm just going to let it go. That tends to be, for many of you, that might just be what you have to do. Now, before you get to that point, you're going to want to at least try to figure out whatever it is you're trying to figure out. And depending on what you're struggling with, a grammar point, pronunciation point, maybe it's trying to understand a person from a certain region. Like, everyone has different types of struggles that they just get stuck on and they can't figure out whatever it is. And obviously the path, the steps you take to try and solve the problem will be different depending on what challenge you're faced with. But I'm going to say something I said in my YouTube video yesterday, which is frequently when you're stuck on a problem, when you hit a roadblock and you're unable to overcome it, the answer is more education. Often, the answer is more education. There's something you don't know that is stopping you from overcoming the challenge. Think of it this way. It's like your brain is a tool belt. And you have 7 tools in your brain, let's say. You have 7 tools in your tool belt. But you're faced with a problem that requires a tool that you don't currently have. And the only way to go get that tool is to learn more about the topic in question. So in our case, language learning. The only general piece of advice I might be able to give is you need to add a new tool to your tool belt, which means you need to learn more about language learning. So for example, if you just can't figure out how to pronounce the French R, well, and no matter what you've done, you haven't been able to figure it out, and you just can't say it. Well, the answer might be you need to go watch other people's videos where they share other advice on how to pronounce the French R. The answer might be you need to go read blog posts about how the brain learns, or articles about how the brain learns pronunciation. You might want to figure out, maybe you want to go learn about phonetics, because maybe learning about phonetics is going to help you then figure out a trick to pronounce the French R. You might have a knowledge gap, and if you expand your knowledge a little bit, that's going to give you the tool you need to then go learn the French R. And this process would work for really any struggle you're having, or most struggles you're having in a language. For example, you're unable to master irregular verbs, maybe in the future tense in whatever language. And no matter what you do, you just can't seem to grasp a specific category of irregular verbs. Who knows why? And you've tried everything you can think of. Well, you need to give yourself new ideas, because you've tried everything you can think of, but you haven't tried everything that you could have tried. You just don't know what else to try. So that means you need to go read, listen to podcasts, watch videos, learn more about that topic to maybe give yourself a new idea of what you might need to try. And so ultimately, I think that's the thing, right? We can summarize this whole video up with that whole second half of the video by saying the following. I think in summary, we can say this. If you're stuck and you can't figure something out, and you've been trying really hard for a long time, the answer might be leave it aside, revisit it at a later date. Or the answer is going to be, you don't know, there's something you don't know that if you were to then know would make it easier for you to learn the thing that you're struggling to learn. So you need to go learn more about language learning, and maybe more about the topic in question, maybe grammar, whatever it is. But there's something you don't know that's holding you back from being able to do the thing that you would like to be able to do. And so it's either expanding your knowledge to give you an idea of something to try that you haven't tried, or you need to maybe leave it aside and revisit it a later time. Well, let's wrap this video/podcast up here. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Feel free to hit me up on any social media platform that you use, that I also use. I use most of them. So it's at Polyglot Azren, POLYGLOT AZ or ZREN. Send me a message and I'm happy to answer any questions you have. You can also email me by visiting my website, and you can go to azrenthelanguagenerd.com/contact. So that's AZ or ZREN thelanguagenerd.com/contact. Have a great day, guys. See you later. Bye-bye.